Wake up, Twins territory, and welcome to Twins Hangouts. I'm Jeremy Nygaard, joined by Seth Stowes. Seth, how you doing tonight?
Doing wonderful. Kind of got the sniffles, but other than that, well, and the fact that I'm watching the Twins game, not great so far tonight. But everything else is not terrible.
When you
How are
said
you?
well, I'm okay, but when you said you had the sniffles, do you mean like you watched a Hallmark commercial or you don't feel well?
Not feel well, and I kind of want to watch Dead Poets Society. I have this urge to watch Dead Poets Society.
And then get the sniffles?
Yeah, my eyes will probably water and all that kind of stuff.
I'm doing all right. I have completed the grueling part of the high school football season. So, you know, that's been my life for the last about 11 days or so. But now, things are going a little bit better. So,
So what happens now? Do you just suddenly not do as much, or what?
well, tomorrow I have to actually do schoolwork, so I'm not going to be at practice, and then we have a shorter day on Thursday, and we have a scrimmage on Friday. So no 10-hour days. Yesterday I was in the high school from 7:30 a.m. until after 5:30 p.m. All football all the time. So yeah, it'll slow down a little bit here, and then school starts in a couple weeks, and off we go for the regular year.
That's crazy. I think high school football starts in Minnesota next Monday. Is that right? Or was that this Monday?
I don't know. All I know is that the season schedule is done backwards. It starts with when is the deer hunting opener in the state of Wisconsin,
Okay.
and then that's on a Saturday morning, and that Thursday and Friday is when they do state football. So then you basically just count backwards, and that's your beginning of the season. It's slightly ridiculous, pretty much annoying, but it is what it is. So we push on.
I mean, I've got relatives in Nebraska that started school today, which to me is just crazy. I like the idea of waiting till after Labor Day like Minnesota does.
Yeah, and we start on September 1st. That's the state mandate. So
Okay.
that's what we roll. But enough about that. Let's talk a little Twins baseball here. Um, for
Hey,
those of you
before
that
we
are,
start,
yeah, go for it.
Jeremy, if anyone's listening to this on the Google Hangouts page, you can send us questions live right on the screen you're looking at by using the Q&A feature. If you're just listening to this elsewhere, YouTube or whatever, you probably can't do that, but you can send us tweets, Jeremy Nygaard or Seth Tweets or at Twins Hangouts, or go to the Twins Daily page that you found this show on and send us questions there. I know there's already about 4 or 5 questions there that we'll get to later in the show. So we want to make this interactive, and I thought we'd start the show by mentioning that right away. So definitely feel free to make the show. If you have questions, let us help answer them.
Yeah, for sure. And also, if you're joining us and you haven't been around doing it live for a couple weeks, obviously you don't see Seth and I. We've turned our cameras off to help improve the audio, and the feedback that we've got is that the audio has been much better since we've done that. So that's how we're going to progress here with the show, and hopefully that makes it a little more enjoyable for you listeners out there. Plus, you don't have to look at us and see what we're doing and that type of thing. So that works for everybody.
Right.
All right, are we ready to move on to the week that we've had? Now, it seems to me like last Tuesday was an awful long time ago, but that just might be because of my week, or maybe it just seemed like a really really long week. I don't know, but let's start with the Trevor May debut, or the Trevor May debacle, whatever one you want to call it. Saturday night, everybody's excited. It's May Day, and at one point you tweeted that out 3 times, only it took on a completely different meaning.
It was a completely different meeting on Saturday at about let's see, game started at 8. By about 8:30, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday meant something completely different than it had throughout Saturday and actually throughout Friday when we learned the news of Trevor May getting that call.
Yeah, for sure. And you were the one to break that news. You You
Yeah,
broke the
but
news to the world by posting an article on Twins Daily at about 20 after 10 that morning, and next thing you knew, it was national news.
it's amazing, and I'm kind of glad you mentioned that because I hope people realize how nerve-wracking that is when you're not like a mainstream media type or, really involved with the team, directly. Because even though you know, and even though you feel pretty confident, once it's out there, it's out there. And I always have this insane fear that the Twins are going to be so upset with me for breaking something that they wanted to break about 14 hours later that they're going to just change their mind just to make me look bad, which of course they wouldn't. That would kind of be ridiculous if they did, but I have this insane fear of that. So as soon as it got posted and I saw it all over Twitter, and I had to go for a walk, and then I started listening to 1500 ESPN, Royce or Mackey and Judd, and they started talking about the breaking news, knowing who the Saturday starter was going to be, and my legs just got wobbly, and it was until about 1 o'clock when it was confirmed by Dustin Morris of the Twins that I finally was able to relax again. So that's 2.5 hours of some good stress.
Yeah, you were noticeably silent on Twitter. I thought maybe something happened to you, but I was at football and I didn't see that you had posted it, and Brandon Warren had made a comment, and and I told him to have some faith or keep the faith or something like that, and then he said, "Oh, I just saw Seth's article." So I read it, and yeah, then the dominoes started to fall all over the place. So that was definitely fun though on Friday. You do mention that you'd hate for the Twins to change their mind. I want to say it was the Pirates in Polanco that someone had broke the news that he was going to be promoted, and the Pirates weren't happy about it. So then you started to hear that like the next day that they changed their mind because they weren't happy how the news broke. I don't know if that's true or not, but glad that
That's my irrational fear of doing something
right,
like that. Because
right,
but I don't know if people realize we talk about you're a teacher, so especially during the school year, your time from whenever in the morning until the end of your day or the end of football practice, I mean, that's your focus. And for me, I've got an 8 to 5 job also that I get an hour at lunch to check things, and once in a while I can kind of peruse the internet, but it's not like we can just sit and focus on this full time. So I mean, it's kind of nerve wracking when, like I said, you're not quite in the know, but you kind of still kind of know, and
right.
and it was a crazy day.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. It was fun though, and your stuff was right. And then we look forward to it all day Saturday, and the results
Yeah,
are Trevor May throws 63 pitches, 28 of them for strikes, uh, walked 7, and gave up 4 runs. The walks included 2 in the first inning, including a bases loaded walk to Derek Norris, and 5 in the second inning, including 3 consecutive after getting 2 outs in the first inning. It was a snowball that was rolling downhill and rolling very, very fast.
yeah, it was hard. It was hard to watch. You feel so bad because there's no question he was ready for it and he deserved it, and it would have happened a month or two ago if not for the injury. I mean, Trevor May is going to pitch tonight now in this move. He's probably going to start in the sixth inning here. Oh wait, there he is. Never mind. Um, but you just feel so bad because he's got the stuff. He's got the 94, 95-mile-an-hour fastball. He's got 3 other pitches that he can use, and they clearly were fine in AAA. And you get to that moment, you could see how much he was pushing himself. I mean, it didn't even look right. He was clearly aiming, and he was trying anything he could do to throw a strike. And Eric Fryer was behind the plate, and after throwing a lot of fastballs, which you would normally be your go-to pitch when you're struggling, you could see Fryer was trying to have him throw changeups and trying to have him throw curveballs just to maybe break the monotony and try anything to see what it would work. And you know, thankfully Gardy took him out after 2 innings. He had already thrown like I think 62 or 65 pitches. And as we've talked about before, they have the rules where if anyone throws 30 or more pitches in any one inning, um, they're coming out, and I think that's a good rule. And it's just too bad. I mean, he's going to get more opportunities. I hope people haven't like and I'm sure most rational fans haven't given up on him. But yeah, he's got, it'll be good for him to get back out there and get past that one.
He is the first player in Twins history to wear number 65 in a game.
Wow. Now that's digging a little bit. That's digging for some deep, great information.
It's trivial, and that's what I do. So
Well, here's the other thing. We probably should talk about this. I don't remember where you had May in your ratings before the season. I think I had him personally in probably that 11, 12 range. I think by the time he was called up, I bet I would have had him more in the 8 to 10 range. Because I think he's really stepped up this year and become a guy that I think we believe can be a starter in the big leagues. But what are your thoughts on what he can become?
that's a good question. I think I was similar. I'd have to go look, but I think I had him around that 12, 13 range. Um, I was going to look at what Baseball America put him in the middle in their midseason rankings. I want to say they had him like 6 or 7 for the Twins. They had him number 6. They had him the Baseball America's top 10 midseason ones went Buxton, Sano, Barrios, Stewart, Meyer, and then May before Thorpe, before Polanco, before Vargas, before Rosario. Um, I guess my thought is that he can be like a number 4, but not a number 4 like Kyle Gibson. More of a number 4 that you can that'll get a few strikeouts. Obviously, he's been better with his walks. Well, had been.
Yeah.
Um, but a guy that can throw a bunch of innings. And I think he's been he's in the minors with the Phillies organization and then with the Twins organization. He threw 151 innings in 2001, 149 in 2002, 151 in 2013. Did I say 2002?
Yeah,
2012.
you did.
You get the point.
Yeah.
But when he can play these full seasons, that he's going to be a guy that should be able to throw 200 innings. And get more strikeouts than like say a Kevin Correa, who was also a number 4, but a guy that you wanted to get a bunch of innings. So, um, you know, that's kind of where I think he could be. Slot him in there with some of those other guys and just throw a bunch of innings, get the strikeouts. Even if he walks a few guys here and there, I'm not real concerned. But there's a difference between being a number 4 where that's the best guy you got, and you got a couple of them, and hopefully for May being a number 4 type guy, but having other good pitchers that you can turn to when you really need a win in the hopefully in the playoffs.
Yeah, and I kind of brought that up because I think with how well he pitched this year, the strikeouts, the fastball, the 4 pitches, I think a lot of people might think that he is, say, a top of the rotation type of starter. But I think it's important that as much as we tout him as he's ready, this is the time. Don't expect him to be Justin Verlander circa 2012, or Max Scherzer or something like that. I mean, he's not a guy that's going to completely dominate. I think you're right. He can be a number 4 who can eat a lot of innings, and in doing so, he can have a year where you'd call him a number 3. I think he can be similar to what Phil Hughes has been in his decent years too. I think there's some similarities in stuff and size, all of that kind of stuff. And certainly Hughes isn't the number 1. He's not a number 2. He's probably a number 3. And so I think that's one point I kind of wanted to make. Um, but the other thing is this is good for him, even though he's working out of the bullpen right now. I think there's value in that, and just getting some of these innings in this type of situation. The Twins have had, and other teams too. We talked about it before. Getting those innings, even if they're out of the bullpen, is going to be beneficial. He's going to be able to use all 3 pitches, work with Suzuki, face big league hitters. I mean, all of these pitches, good or bad, the results don't matter this year. It's all beneficial. It's all good at this time.
Right, and here's the thing that frustrates me a little bit. The Twins were a team, and obviously when they had Johan Santana, it was a little bit different because he was a Rule 5 guy that had to stay in the big leagues. But
Right.
you let him work through the bullpen, and like the Blue Jays are doing with Aaron Sanchez. he's going to be probably a top of the rotation guy, but he's working out of the bullpen. So you can put him in spots where he can succeed, and I don't know, I haven't looked recently, but he was doing really well. Why didn't the Twins do that with May earlier this year, or do that with Meyer right now? Or why don't they do that with guys and have them, develop that as they, you know, at that age instead of having them continue to throw a number of innings in Rochester when they want them more consistent? Get them up here with the big league staff and have them work through that stuff in the bullpen.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that one, I'd like to see them in the big leagues, of course. We want to see Meyer. We've wanted to see May, you know. But at the same time, we know they're going to be developing, and we know it's going to take some time, and we know it's not just going to happen overnight. And frankly, even though the Twins and we all kind of knew that they weren't going to compete this year, you do just kind of throw those veterans out there and you see what you got, and you go with them until you're officially out, and you let these guys develop. May had never pitched in AAA, so a good stretch at the beginning of the season doesn't necessarily mean call him up right away that he's ready. He needs to go through some of those struggles and frustrations and adjustments. Alex Myers had serious ups and downs throughout the course of this year. He was really good for about 6 starts, and then he had a game that same night, Saturday night, that he was terrible. And, I mean, you can't just call all of them up right away and think that things are going to be better. So I don't necessarily have a problem with it, but now that we're into August, and I just think it's time. It's time to let these guys get some innings. Or at bats. I mean, we're talking about Vargas and Santana. All these guys, get them some innings, get them some at bats.
Right. And one of the things that the Twins can do to clear some of that the log jam here is start moving players, and we can talk about what happened then after the game on Saturday. After the clunker on Saturday night, it was announced that Kevin Correa was traded to the Dodgers for a player to be named later or cash. What was your initial reaction to that deal?
It was a surprise. It was surprise in a couple of ways. One, the timing. Like you said, right after a Saturday night game isn't exactly normal time to be hearing about trades. But secondly, the fact that they found a taker for Correa. I mean, the Dodgers need pitching. With Josh Beckett being out for the year or maybe out forever, it'll be important to they needed arms, and they already had added Roberto Hernandez, but they wanted more arms. And for them to have any interest, I mean, even if it ends up being a bit of cash, what it did was it opened up starts for other players. And that, I think, is pretty important. So, but Correa threw 6 innings for the Dodgers the other day and beat the Braves. I mean, he pitched well, and I think he had 2 hits from what I read.
2 for 2.
So yeah, I mean, hopefully that means the Twins will get an actual player in the deal, which I think would shock me.
Yeah, the part that I found funny was that he cleared waivers, which, I mean, that doesn't surprise me. But then that the Twins would turn around and be able to dump off the whole salary and get a player, which makes me think it's not really going to be a player. They saved $1.5 million, which to the Dodgers is like 14 cents.
Right.
And I think my initial thought was typically when you hear about a player trade that the cash is involved, it's $50,000. So, I think maybe that the I don't remember how I exactly worded it afterwards. If potentially the Twins send $50,000 over with Kevin Correa, and then at the end of the year they get $50,000 back, and it was basically, hey, just take them off our hands. Which then opened a spot for the Twins to immediately call up trade deadline acquisition Tommy Milone,
right,
who made his debut yesterday. So all in all, I mean, I'll take that in a heartbeat. Save $1.5 million, replace Correa with a guy that's really been better in the major leagues than he has been anyway, and all the while push back Malone's service time so that you get an extra year of him, and he'll go through arbitration 4 times, but getting a young guy in, and not that he's super young, but getting him back up, getting him up originally for the Twins, was the right move to make.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that the Dodgers took on the 1.5 million, and people are going to talk about the Twins dumping salary and being cheap. I'm sure people have already thrown that out there, and I know that's not how you meant it, but that's money that can be spent if they choose to or don't choose to or whatever. But I mean, the reality is that's exactly what they should be doing. If they can actually dump some salary, fine. But the key is opening up the roster spot and getting Malone up here so you can start seeing him, or the other trade and getting to see someone else. I mean, that's more important than the actual money factor.
Yeah, so that move then that cleared the way for Malone also cleared a 40-man spot because they didn't take anybody back. They had, I believe, they had 40 guys after claiming Jordan Schaefer last week. So removing Correa then dropped him to 39, which probably doesn't make a huge difference right now. But with everybody being placed on waivers, having that spot can, maybe you try to get a guy. I don't know if that's likely because a lot of guys that are valuable just get pulled back. But it can keep you active on the waiver wire, and maybe take a chance like the Twins did on Schaefer. So all in all, getting that spot, getting Malone in, clearing that 40-man spot, that was going to be cleared anyway, obviously, because Correa was a free agent. All of those things are good. But let's talk a little bit about Tommy Malone, who made his debut yesterday in Houston for the Twins.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we knew that he didn't throw hard. We knew that he relies on not only control but command. And then we finally got to see him. I know we've seen him pitch against the Twins, but you're not really paying attention at that point. He's a different, unique pitcher. I mean, you just watch him and you're seeing Tom Glavine, you're seeing Jamie Moyer, you're also seeing Andrew Albers. So, I mean, there's a very fine line in that type of a pitcher when you're topping out at 88 miles an hour. He's been successful and he had a good start. I think did he give up 2 runs over 6 innings or 5 innings in his debut with the Twins? I mean, he was fine. He is what he is, and again, that's not a top of the rotation starter by any means, but he's a guy who's used his style to be successful at the big league level for several years already, and he's earned the right to be a big leaguer, and they got him up really quick. It was a matter of clearing some space and doing some of that stuff, probably even more so than the arbitration concerns and that kind of stuff. To me, that's secondary. They just needed to clear some space and see what they could get. So it was good to see him get that first start. It'll be good to see him work, over the next 8 or 9 starts the rest of the season.
Yeah, his line yesterday threw 97 pitches. Um, I don't see it in front of me, but really struggled with first pitch strikes. I think he was like 50% on first pitch strikes. Went 6 innings, allowed 8 hits, only 2 earned runs, both of which were solo home runs. Struck out 5, got ground ball outs and 13 fly ball outs. So, um, dropped his yearly ERA on the year anyway to, I believe, 3.52. Um, if that sounds right, making his first major league start since the 4th of July when the A's obviously acquired Jeff Samardzija and Jason Hamill. But no, I mean he's a guy that you'll be able to plug into the rotation, and having a crafty lefty, because that's what he is. He's crafty. In between a guy like potentially Alex Meyer, who's going to throw it really really hard, and eventually Jose Barrios, who throws it pretty hard too. I mean it's going to be a change up for teams, and he's probably another back of the rotation guy, but again, if this is your number 4, number 5 starter, that's a pretty solid guy to have. And obviously, there's big holes, um, but we look to have those filled by the likes of Alex Meyer. And if Kyle Gibson keeps developing, maybe he develops into more of a 2-3 guy than the 3-4 guy that we talked about earlier. So yeah, I mean, and his first name is Tommaso, so that's cool too.
Well, you gotta like that.
Yeah, it's not
I,
just Tommy.
do you think is I mean Is he a name you can write in pen for the opening day roster for 2015?
Yes.
I tend to think so too. Do you? I mean, in that opening day roster 2015, I think we can put Phil Hughes, Ricky Nolasco, and Tommy Malone and Kyle Gibson in pen.
Yes, for sure.
And after that, it's going to be a competition between the likes of Trevor May, Alex Meyer, and if they bring in any free agents.
Right.
Am I missing someone? I mean, to me, that's 4 out of 5 that you're pretty well set on unless something crazy happens.
Right. I think that's probably how you operate. I think all the lefties at AAA will get an opportunity, but I think they should all start the year in AAA. And guys like Logan Darnell, Chris Johnson, Sean Gilmartin. But Barrios is gonna. I mean, he's gonna be a non-roster guy. He's not gonna make the opening day roster, but he's another guy that you got to think about at some point. If the Twins went out and got one guy, could they start the year with both Meyer and May in the bullpen?
No,
They wouldn't. You don't think they would do that?
I don't think they would, and I don't think they should. I mean, not that they're young. I mean, I know people like to worry way too much about age and call up age and stuff, but I mean, if you want these guys to be starters, I think you use them as starters at least for the first month of the season to kind of build up some of that. And then if you want to call them up once they built up some arm strength and put them in at long relief or whatever role you want, that's fine. Usually within a month or 6 weeks of the beginning of the season, something opens up in the rotation for whatever reason it is, whether it's an injury or lack of performance or something. So I'd have those guys ready to be called up.
The other name too that we neglected to mention was Mike Pelfrey, who will be under contract again next year.
That's true. That's true. And if healthy, you have to wonder how he fits into the plans.
Well, he's well liked, and Ryan could be like, hey, he's like our free agent addition this year. We didn't have him last year. We expect big things from him this year.
So, knowing kind of where they're at with all of those names that you've just dropped, do you see them going out and adding anything other than maybe a couple of minor league veteran starting pitching options?
No,
Do you see them going out and getting even a $5 million starting pitching?
I doubt it. I mean, if they're eh, no, they won't. I would think that they should get in the bidding with John Lester. They won't, and I would love to see what happens if Johnny Cueto. I mean, he's a free agent to be, and Max Scherzer. I mean, there's three of them right there. Maybe I'm forgetting another name. Maybe they go after a guy like Brandon McCarthy. I think he's a free agent as well. But if you're going to roll the dice with some of those, with someone that's not going to be a front end guy, just don't. Just go with what you have. I mean, I'd much prefer that than taking up a spot. Because I'd rather take my lumps with Trevor May or Alex Meyer if there's not going to be another guy there. Unfortunately, we'll take our lumps with Mike Pelfrey while Alex Meyer and Trevor May try to, become consistent in AAA again.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even Brandon McCarthy does nothing for me when you've got these other options. If you're going to go out and sign someone, it should be Lester or Scherzer or Cueto. Make that kind of move instead of making the $6 to $10 million types. I just don't think those guys make much sense. And then again, I don't think giving $100 million to a starting pitcher makes any sense either. So
Right.
they never pay off. So I'd tend to stick to the guys they have.
Yeah. Although you could make the case that if they don't go after somebody this year, they get all their guys up next year and start competing near the end of next year, that they could spend a ton of money on David Price as kind of the final piece for 2016, and then go get those Tigers and go get those Royals.
You could try to make that case, sure.
I would make that case. Get David Price.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't have a problem with that. I just, I tend to try to be a little more realistic.
I know. But also very optimistic.
Right.
So maybe we should switch roles here, and I'll be optimistic, and you can be realistic.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Yesterday, okay, so we go through Sunday's game, and we knew that Malone was going to get called up for yesterday.
Yep.
And and we also knew that Joe Mauer was going to be activated. So Nolasco, or not Nolasco, but Correa gets traded. Malone takes his place. We need a spot for Joe Mauer, and nothing had been said, nothing had been done. Rumor that maybe Trevor Plouffe would go on the DL because he had a foot thing, but then he was in the lineup, and Oswaldo Arcia was not playing because of a back thing, so maybe he was going to go on the DL. The other popular thing was Brian Presley has options, so maybe he could be optioned. But the Twins don't make a move. They don't make a move. They don't make a move. And then Doogie tweets out, I don't even know what time it was, not too much before the game started, that the Twins had traded Josh Willingham to the now Central first place Kansas City Royals in exchange for minor league pitcher Jason Adam.
When it was taking that long, and we had heard over like Saturday, I think, that there were people out there saying that the Twins were going to start unloading some of their veterans. Should have figured it out. Of course, hindsight's always 2020, but I mean, when you see what's happening and it's taking that long to make a decision, to get that close to the game time and not make a DL move or an option or something like that, should have known that something was going on. But I guess I just didn't even think about it until it actually happened, and we heard about that, like you said, from Doogie, Darren Wolfson. Kind of again another surprise. Willingham has hit some home runs over the last few weeks, but he has done very little in between. He really can't play outfield and strikes out a ton. And at his age, you wonder if he's just done. But they not only traded him in the division, but they got a guy who throws 95, and I don't care about anything else, whether he's got bad control or anything else. If you got a 23-year-old who's already pitched in AAA who has the ability to hit 95, consider that a win-win in my opinion. To me that's a nice work, Terry Ryan.
Right, I agree with that 100%. Also, it should be mentioned that the Royals picked up the rest of Willingham's contract, which he was
Okay.
placed on waivers.
All right.
He was placed on waivers, claimed off waivers, so the Twins could only trade him to the Royals.
Right.
And we knew that the Twins were going to get rid of him. So the fact that the Twins could get a player is a steal. That they could get the player and dish the salary, also another steal. I look at that as a great deal. Now, the skeptics will point out that during Willingham's 2012 season, maybe he should have been dished off then. We don't know how much value I don't know who had reported or who had said it, but the one thing that I remember hearing in 2012 is that he would be the return value on Josh Willingham was a number 4 starter in 2012. And we don't know what was going on in those conversations, what the Twins really could have got. But in 2012, if the Twins would have got Jason Adam, who at the time was, in high A, I think, and was I think he was like the number 6 Royals prospect, maybe number 5, would have been the Twins' top pitching prospect if they would have traded for him in 2012. People would have liked that deal in 2012. So I guess I don't see why people are all bent out of shape that they didn't get what they could have in 2012 and instead basically got this lottery ticket in 2014. Yeah, it's a good deal. Jason Adam, who had pitched in AAA like you mentioned, is going back to AA, where the Twins will try to convert him back to a starter. He was recently converted to a bullpen arm in AAA for Kansas City. So all in all, I think that's a good deal. Also a guy that's not on the 40-man, but will likely be added in November, if not before. So,
Jeremy, let me ask you this. I know you've researched it a little more than I have. What is the scouting report on Jason Adam?
I don't have it in front of me. 95 and a curveball that flash plus. Strike some guys out. Workhorse arm. Um, I think there's some questions about his ability to repeat his delivery, and that's why he walks a bunch of guys. Baseball America, J.J. Cooper, who writes for Baseball America, really liked the deal for the Twins. Said that he could be a uh, inning eater at the back of the rotation at his best. But even if he doesn't develop into that, the best that he can be, that he could still be a very good bullpen arm. So if that's the floor on this guy, still a great deal for a 2 month rental of Josh Willingham.
Yeah, and people continue to say, why do they keep going after back of the rotation? Why do they go after guys who are probably going to be bullpen guys? Kind of like Stephen Pryor from the Mariners and the Kenji Morales deal. Well, you get something. I think that's the biggest key. You get something for these guys instead of nothing, and you can always use more arms, even if they're bullpen arms. The reality is, and I say this all the time, there aren't that many number ones and number twos, and people hold on to their prospects, especially pitching prospects, so tightly. And again, for Willingham, you're not going to get a top starter. You just need to clear that roster space and give him. And the other part is people don't like hearing it, but if you can give a guy who's spent 3 years with your organization, he's been through all reports, a great teammate, really good in the clubhouse, really good person, and give him an opportunity to get into a pennant race, and he's going to get right into it right away with the Royals on that in the AL Central race with the Tigers. Good for him and good for the Twins for giving him that opportunity. Now, if you can get a pitcher, like I said, who's got the 95, who's 23 and has seen time in AAA already, I mean, it's just a great deal. So, and yeah, people can hindsight and look back. I mean, we all, after his Silver Slugger Award 2 years ago when he hit 35 home runs, drove in 110 runs, at age I think 34, you knew he wasn't going to keep that up. You knew he wasn't going to get better. But to accept at that time, what I had heard, you had said number 4, but I had kind of heard that they could have got a couple of guys whose ceiling might have been number 3s, which probably means number 5s. I mean, that
Right.
why would you do that? I mean, yeah, he's not going to be better. You don't assume he's just going to get hurt and miss the entire most of the year either. So, it was a risk they took by not trading him that didn't really pay off, but they got a good return in the end. And you just don't know. So you just got to do what's right at the time.
Right. And Jason Adam was he was maybe like I don't even remember what round he was taken, fourth or sixth. They went over slot to sign him. Kansas City did. Gave him I think $800,000 to bypass his scholarship offer from Missouri and sign. So he was a high school guy that signed and didn't pitch at all in that first year. But then in 2011 threw 104 innings in low A, which I mean that's where Cole Stewart is right out of high school, and
Yeah.
went to high A the next year, pitched really well, threw 158 innings. So that's a pretty durable. I mean, for a minor league guy to throw 158 innings, that's pretty impressive. Backed it up last year with a pretty good year at Double A through 144 innings, and so far this year, I believe he's thrown 113. So when you can count, when you have this many arms, and I tweeted earlier, and we can talk about this, later in the show or whenever. But when Nolasco's activated, that gives the Twins 6 starters. The Red Wings currently bringing up Virgil Vasquez from New Britain, counting him, gives them 6 starters. And now adding Jason Adam to a rotation that recently activated Taylor Rogers and Jose Barrios gives those guys 6 starters. And even Fort Myers, they have 5 guys active and have Baxendale, Hurlbut, and Shibuya on the disabled list. I mean, the Twins have there's not great quality. The quality is much better than it was a handful of years ago, but they have great quantity in these arms that could potentially be at some point major league arms. So I think they're doing the right thing. It's really, really hard, like you said, to find number ones and number twos. They made a great signing with Phil Hughes, who I think, did I read, has the highest F WAR, or tied with Kershaw, um, of all the pitchers in baseball. You're not going to find those guys just lying around, but if you have a ton of potential number threes, or maybe in this case number fours, number fives, but those types of guys, you set yourself up really well, not only for this year but for the future as well.
I mean, the thing to remember is that number three starters are pretty valuable. Those are guys that get $10 million a year. So if you've got a whole bunch of number threes, that's pretty good. And I'm not saying the Twins will end up with a whole bunch of number threes. They might not. But if you have a bunch of potential number threes, that's a positive. But you also got guys like Meyer and Barrios that could be ones and twos. And May is a guy, along with Gibson, who probably could be a number three. And every once in a while, those guys have a year where you might want to even call them a two, or they might become a four at the worst case. And then you've got a bunch of guys that, you feel pretty good about being back half of the rotation starters. Here's the other thing. You keep adding all these bullpen arms, and you add them to Nick Birdie, and you add them to Glenn Perkins and Casey Fien, and, I think Brian Dunsing maybe fits into that right now. Add that to Michael Tonkin and Lester Oliveros and, some of these starters that will end up becoming bullpen guys, the Mason Malatakis, Nick Birdie's going to come up, Jake Reed, maybe John Curtis and Michael Cedoroff. You got Stephen Pryor and maybe Jason Adam. All these guys, if the Twins had a lot of success throughout the 2000s, and even going back further when they had successes, if you can give me 6 innings, we're going to have bullpen arms that are going to dominate the 7th, 8th, and 9th. Like, if we have a lead through 6, or if we're in a game through 6, that bullpen's going to come through most of the time. The Twins have had that for even these down years. Generally speaking, the bullpen's been pretty good, and they're now acquiring guys that throw 94 to 98, maybe even 102 in the case of Birdie. It's all about that long-term plan, and I know that some may disagree, but it's been about a 3 or 4 year process. But you can see the plan coming into action, and to me, that's as important as the results.
Right, and at the end of the day, if you need to deal off some of these chips, you at least have them in your pocket to do.
Right.
When they compete, they're going to have an abundance of arms that are at least intriguing. And if that's what Cedoroff, who's not been great in the Appy League, but if you have a guy that, hey, he throws 100 miles an hour, all of a sudden you can turn around and you can get a guy in July that can help you for the stretch run, and that's another thing that shouldn't be overlooked. Obviously, we watch the Twins and they're not close to competing, but there's a wave coming up, and maybe not next year yet, but that'll all click. But shortly after that, hopefully everything starts to come together, and the light of the tunnel is much closer than what it is right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's a faction of Twins fans that look at Carlos Gutierrez as a reason that you don't go after the bullpen arms and move them into the rotation when they're younger. You can look at Cedoroff, you can look at many examples. But Gutierrez, I still agree with the philosophy. I agree with the thought process, which is you got a good fastball. You need to develop that second and even that third pitch. Even if you're going to be a bullpen arm, you're going to need a second and preferably a third pitch. The only way to do that is to get innings and use those pitches and pitch in situations where, one, you start an inning, or two, you get yourself into some troubles. Maybe you've got second and third and one out. Can you get out of that inning? Yes, you can get into that as a bullpen arm, but you can also get into that as a starting guy, and that gives you more pitches to figure some of these things out. So, yeah, sure, Nick Birdie, you're not going to have him start. But Cedoroff starting, John Curtis starting. Look at Tyler Duffy. I mean, yeah, he doesn't strike out a ton, but he just continues to climb up the ladder and get better. And, if that philosophy leads to one guy becoming a decent major league starter and all of them or, several of them becoming adding that second or third pitch or working in those situations. Mason Militakis was a starter for a year and a half in the minor leagues before they moved him back to the bullpen. And that experience, most say, was incredibly beneficial for him. And we'll see how the elbow works out for him, but he's a guy that could be up fairly quick, too. So I think there's a struggle that I have, and I think a lot of people have. I worry myself more about process and planning and things like that, more so than, say, the results of a 9-1 game right now, in the big league level. I think you have to continue to think long term, and hopefully that long term is starting to get shorter.
Right. Let's move on to some of the transactions that have happened. I'm going to go back to, I think it's last Tuesday. I don't know if we covered the Aaron Hicks basically swapping spots with Edgar Ibarra. Hicks up to Rochester, Ibarra down to New Britain. That was Tuesday. And then we didn't have any action Wednesday, Thursday. And then Friday, Matt Summers was placed on the disabled list in New Britain. Jonathan Murphy was released from Cedar Rapids. And Zach Larson and Zach Granite at some point were moved down to rehab. Zach Granite eventually ended up on the DL in the GCL. Not anything very exciting. Then on the 9th, Chris Calabello was optioned down to Rochester, and Taylor Rogers was activated. On the 10th, Jose Barrios was activated in New Britain. And then on the 11th, we had the series of moves where Malone went up to Minnesota, Virgil Vasquez went from New Britain to Rochester, DJ Baxendale went from Fort Myers to the Gulf Coast League to rehab. And then all of a sudden, on the 12th, which was today, last night and today, a series of moves that took place. So we'll start at the very bottom, and it started with coming up from Elizabethton to Cedar Rapids, an infielder by the name of Jonathan Hinoyosa. Is that how you say that?
Works for me.
He was with Cedar Rapids earlier this year, got suspended, went down to E-Town, and now he's back up. Coming from Fort Myers to Cedar Rapids was Brian Gilbert, who was basically the Colonel's closer last year and didn't really have a lot of success in Fort Myers, and now he's back in Cedar Rapids. The two guys leaving Cedar Rapids, like you mentioned, as you mentioned earlier, Nick Birdie, who throws it really, really hard, and Brian Haar, who's been playing third base every day, going from Cedar Rapids to Fort Myers. And then Fort Myers sent Levi Michael, their everyday second baseman, who's had a great year, to New Britain, and Uber prospect Byron Buxton, who's not been great, but is making that next step. Officially, there hasn't been anything that New Britain has done. They also got Jason Adam, but I think they were a guy short before that. So when Michael and Buxton are officially on the roster, I had him at 27. I'm not sure where you had him. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
Not yet. Maybe by the end of the show I'll be able to say more. I know that there's been one release and one DL placement, and there's another move coming. But hopefully we'll be able to talk about that maybe later in the show. Yeah, I don't really know where to go with all that. That was a lot of information.
Yeah, well, do we want to talk about the main prospects, the Byron Buxtons, the Nick Birdies, those types of things?
Sure. Or we could talk about the lesser prospects.
Talk about the what? You kind of broke up there on me.
The lesser prospects, because that's what we do.
Yeah, I mean, Levi Michael, he's a guy that was a first-round pick and was pushed past Cedar Rapids. Now, let's go back. He graduated high school early, so he wasn't drafted out of high school because he graduated early. Basically played his 3 years in at North Carolina and was good, but injured his third year, his junior year, which was really like his sophomore year. And didn't really have any success his first year, didn't really have any success his second year, but in his third go-around has had a ton of success. So he was promoted. Will play second base for the Rockcats, and I think a lot of us assume that he'll get a chance in the Arizona Fall League to move up and try to grab one of those 40-man spots because he'll need to be added or Rule 5. Um, and more depth with the second baseman in the organization. So, he's a guy that I've checked probably more on this year than I really thought I would. Um, do you think he's a guy that goes to Arizona and eventually gets added?
I think the purpose, and we talked about this, and it was John Manuel that tweeted it, and it makes complete sense. The Twins don't necessarily have a ton of prospects that would go up to the Arizona Fall League in Double A and Triple A. So I think we're going to see some guys from Fort Myers go. But in order to do that, they have to have more guys up at Double A to allow for that. So I think Buxton and Michael moving up indicates that they're going to get a chance to play in the Arizona Fall League, and it makes sense. I mean, Buxton, as we know, has missed a ton of time. Michael missed about 2.5 months because he fouled the ball off his foot. So getting him extra bases and kind of seeing how he does against that upper level is a good thing. But now those two will classify as Double A players, and as we know, the rule is that you can only have two players from below Double A play. So you move those two up to Double A. You don't have to worry about them anymore. Now you can still call up two other guys that are on that Fort Myers roster. So there's obviously some interesting names there. I think Michael's probably a given to go along with Buxton.
It's interesting though because Mike Berardino in a article tonight, um, had asked if that was why they were moved up, and the response he got was, "No, that didn't have anything to do with it." Which I
Take that
kind
as you will.
I kind of chuckled at that because I mean, why wouldn't you just say, "Yeah, we're trying to." I guess maybe you can't say that. I don't know.
You can't really say we're trying to work the system.
Well, the someone had posted on Twins Daily that the requirement is actually that they be in Double A by August 1st.
Well, if that's
So,
the case, it becomes interesting.
right. But last year, Alex Meyer went, and the requirement was that they were active so many days before. I think they had to be active on August 1st, and Meyer wasn't, and he was still allowed to play. So, I think the rules for being in the AFL, I think they're kind of lax, and they want to get the best prospects possible. And you know if they needed
Yeah.
a third guy from Fort Myers to include Byron Buxton, I don't think that they would be like, nope, sorry, rules are rules.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is just you need a waiver sometimes from the team. That's what they needed to do, to get Meyer to be eligible. I mean, I'm sure there'd be some of that involved in this as well.
Right. Um, Jonathan Murphy was released. He was drafted out of Jacksonville along with Adam Walker a couple years ago. His brother is his brother Daniel Murphy,
Yep,
who was an all-star for was it the Rangers at one point?
the Mets.
The other one plays for the Rangers.
He did.
I can't keep them straight. I really can't. Too many Murphys. Here's the thing, Seth. There's only one Murphy that matters, and his name is Max.
Or Dale.
I'm talking currently.
Oh, Max Murphy, by the way, who was named the Player of the Month in the Appalachian League for
Yeah,
July.
yeah, you totally just stole my thunder there.
Well, I like to do that.
You just took it right from under me.
Sorry.
I just don't have anything else to say now. Rehabbing. There's a bunch of guys that are rehabbing. I don't think I mentioned these guys. David Hurlbut, who was on the DL at Fort Myers, is rehabbing with the Gulf Coast League Twins. He's made 2 starts, so I would assume he would be active at some point. Josh Burris was transferred down to the GCL. I don't know if that's a rehab or if that's where he's pitching. Zach Larson, I believe, was actually transferred down to the GCL. Um, I would think that he'll get back up to Cedar Rapids before the end of the year. Corey Wimberly is also rehabbing. He was on the Double A roster. Zach Granite was rehabbing, but then I think was transferred to the roster and then DL'd. And DJ Baxendale, who threw a couple innings either yesterday or the day before in the GCL. Uh, the GCL Twins also moved Miguel Gonzalez, Roberto Gonzalez, and Onis Farfan to the 60-day DL, which um, also reminds me that Mason Malatakis, who's showed up on the 60-day DL for New Britain for the good part of 2 weeks, Mike Berardino reported today that he's actually on the 7-day DL, and it's some elbow tenderness, I think is the term he used.
Inflammation is the word I had heard.
Elbow inflammation. Yes, that's
Yeah.
what he had said too. So he could be back relatively soon, which is good. I have some emails out because we understand what the 60-man DL does in the major leagues. If your 40-man is full, and you have a guy that's deemed out for a long time, you can move him to the 60-man and then add another guy. So you really are given an exemption on your 40-man. There's no 40-man in the minor leagues. So there's some reserve lists which are very, very not public. Um, but I don't really understand what, like, for example, the rookie leagues, you can have 35 active players. And I think you can have, maybe they change that, but you have 35 active players. Well, putting a guy on the DL makes him not active. But having a guy on the 60-day DL, what's the difference between the 7-day DL and the 60-day DL? It doesn't make sense to me. So, Seth, if you know, that would be great. But nobody in the world seems to know why there's a 60-day DL in the minor leagues.
I don't know. I didn't even ask. I mean, the assumption is that it's a longer, lingering type of thing, but I've never seen it used in previous years. And now we've seen it for what was that, 4 guys this year? I don't get it. And at the end of the day, I don't know.
You don't know either, just like everybody else. Um, I'm making some last-ditch efforts to try to figure it out because I certainly have no idea. I mean, the reserve list is the reserve list. I didn't think that was something that changed throughout the year. I thought that was just something you had to submit at the end of the year. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't really know. I don't know. Is there
Yeah,
any
I
other?
probably won't look into it.
Well, I am looking into it because it bothers me. It irritates me.
All right.
Um,
Take care of that one.
is there anybody else that you would like to talk about from the list of guys that we mentioned?
Well, I mean, I think there's several. I mean, Brian Gilbert getting sent from Fort Myers back to Cedar Rapids. I know both of us were pretty high on him. I mean, you were high on him right when they drafted him. When I saw him in Fort Myers, I mean, he's a big, stocky guy. I think he looks the part of a late inning reliever, but he struggled at Fort Myers. And as you said earlier, he was a guy that, despite being just drafted last year, didn't take him too long to get up to Cedar Rapids and be a late inning guy for them. So, I mean, it's got to be disappointing for him. A year later to be back where he was at this time last year, it has to be disappointing. But, you don't want to make too much of that either, because the fact is he's, I think, what, 8th-round pick last year out of Seton Hall, maybe a 6th-round pick. And, you got a guy like Nick Birdie, who obviously you want to kind of push a little quicker because he's elite. So, it does totally make sense.
He was a 7th-round pick, so you skated around it, but
I was going to average him out and see if you had noticed that.
close enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I watched him down in Cedar Rapids late last year. I don't know. I think he pitched one game. It wasn't great, but everybody that I talked to down there that had seen him really liked him and knew that the Twins were really high on him. So, I guess I don't know. You could speculate on what maybe happened. He's a bigger dude, so conditioning could always be an issue. Um, but I don't know. Maybe it's just kind of a wake-up call and send him down. But you also have Dallas Gallant and Jake Reed down there that have pitched really well in late inning situations too. So, the way that he fits, it's interesting because there's a lot of guys, and Zach Jones is back. I mean, throwing a little bit now, so in games. So you have a lot of these late inning guys that really it's time they got to get it done, or they're going to get passed up by other guys. Because there's been guys like we mentioned, Brandon Peterson, who's had a great year, and he's a guy that nobody's even talking about. So
Right.
there's a lot of stuff going on that I haven't I followed the minor leagues closely for 3 4 years, not as long as you have, but it just seems like there's a lot more quality in different spots than there really ever has been before.
Yeah, I mean, part of that's just the Twins farm system is strong. Part of it's they have totally focused in the draft the last 2 years, maybe even 3 years, on pitching and college pitching. Especially in those as we talked about rounds 6 through 10. This year they definitely had another focus on that, and in doing so, there's less offensive guys. Obviously they took Nick Gordon early and they took Buxton early, and there were a few examples, but for the most part they've gone pitching heavy, and that's where you're going to get, fourth round guy in Zach Jones, fifth round guy in Jake Reed, second round Nick Birdie, Cedroth in the third, Gilbert in the seventh. I mean, you're getting a lot of Brandon Peterson, I think, was an 11th or 12th round pick. And these college guys that are late inning college guys aren't necessarily going to get drafted in this top couple of rounds unless they're Nick Birdie, but they still have really good stuff, and the Twins are kind of, maybe it's a Moneyball thing or something where they're seeing that teams just don't want to go after relievers, and the Twins are kind of going after them, and right now it's kind of looking like a positive from that sense because of all the names we've talked about.
Yeah, for sure. Do we want to talk about what's going on in the world of the minor leagues with the Twins today?
Well, we could probably spend a little time on that. We could start with Rochester because, as we alluded to already, there was a no hitter in.
You still with me, Seth? Yeah, you started to break
Yeah,
up
can
a
you hear
little
me?
bit. Yeah, you got excited about that no hitter, and I think the your internet maybe cut out or something. But you're back. You're good. Let's talk about the no hitter.
Well, Trevor May started a game a couple weeks ago and was only able to go 3 innings because of rain. And yesterday they continued that game. They threw Logan Darnell on the mound, and he went the final 6 innings and finished the no hitter. So kind of neat, kind of unusual. It happened started in one city and then finished in another city. A month later or a couple weeks later. So um, but obviously that's a big deal. Even though it's in AAA. But I mean, if nothing else, Logan Darnell threw 6 no-hit innings. I mean, that's something we can take something from. So a lot of good stuff there. But tonight they played, but they only got through 2 innings because it rained again against Durham. Sean Gilmartin pitched the 2 innings. Other than that, there wasn't much to talk about other than rain.
So you don't want to talk about anything else? Should we talk about some of the research that you did this morning?
You could do that a little bit. I mean, after work, I did some research and found a few things about that Elizabethton roster. Just, again, I always find it interesting not only to talk about the stars, but to talk about some of the guys that don't get talked about as much. So I looked at the league leaders, and James Beresford is fifth in the International League in hits. He's hitting 287, getting on base 33.5% of the time, and slugging 369. But he's a guy probably we don't talk about enough. Potential utility for the Twins. Obviously, he was a minor league free agent the last couple of years and will be again at the end of the year, but he's a guy you'd like to see get a chance. Davinson Romero, 31 doubles, is tied for fifth in the International League. But then it's where it kind of gets interesting, and we've talked about these guys before. In terms of ERA in the International League, Trevor May is third with a 2.84 ERA. Chris Johnson's eighth at 3.28. Logan Darnell ninth at 3.30, and Alex Meyer 10th at 3.32. If you go to WHIP, Trevor May is third at 1.16. Chris Johnson 10th at 1.27. Strikeouts, Alex Meyer tied for first with 132 strikeouts in 114 innings. Walks, Alex Meyer is first with 57 walks in 114 innings. So, that's kind of the leaderboard. Any of those guys we should talk further about, other than I just, like I said, wanted to kind of look and see where some of the Twins minor leaguers are relative to the league.
Well, Doug Bernier, there was actually Oh, I guess that's James Beresford. I was thinking Doug Berniers had a pretty good year, but Beresford came up in a question too. I'm going to see if I can find it. It was a Twitter question from Leland Steva, at KELO Steva. Um, and his question was, what's more likely, Florimone keeps his spot on the 40 man, or someone like Beresford or Levi gets a spot? Um, could you see a
During
situation?
the season?
Well, that's the thing. Could you see a situation during the season where Floorman maybe gets DFA'd and Beresford gets added and gets brought up in September, or do you not see that happening?
I mean, that is a scenario that could happen. Although Florimo's been playing much better again lately, and they, have invested some time in him. I could see them calling up Beresford or Florimon at the end of the Rochester season. And obviously, if it's Florimon, no 40-man roster decisions needs to be made. If it were Beresford or Bernier, um, it would likely be Florimon's spot that would be taking.
So,
As for Levi Michael, I think there's an outside chance he could be added to the 40 man after the season, but certainly not during the season.
right. I guess if I had to make a prediction, I would say Florimone stays on the 40 man and maybe probably gets a September call up. Beresford or Bernier, I don't think both of them because, well, maybe. I doubt it. Maybe gets added in September. Neither of them spend the offseason on the 40 man, and Levi Michaels
Right.
added to the 40 man. Florimone's going to be an interesting case because I think he would get taken, he'd get snapped up in waivers because he's good defensively.
For
So,
sure.
but at this point, I don't know if he's got a spot with the Twins, which I don't think he does. What's the point of keeping him? I mean, if you have Escobar who's playing really well, you have Santana who you think still might be in the mix, and you're adding another middle infielder in Michael. You already have Polanco on the 40 man. What's the point of having Pedro Florimon? Maybe you work out a deal, for somebody else's 39th or 40th guy in their 40 man, or whatever. Give him away. Um, but I just don't see how he fits on this roster when November rolls around.
I don't think he does, and it goes back to where we've talked about before. You want to also allow Rochester to remain competitive. And I mean, he's a pretty good AAA shortstop. I mean, yeah, he's still not going to hit a ton, and he struggled early with the glove, but he's been really good the last month and a half. I think he would get claimed. Maybe they can get something for him, but it's not going to be enough to worry about. At the end of the day, do we care if he gets claimed with the options that you've talked about and just mentioned? Probably not. But at this point, might as well wait until at least after the Rochester season.
Right, and that's where I am. I'm just thinking when it gets to the week after the season that you could just take him right off. And if he had options left, I mean, maybe you think about keeping him around, but he'll be out of options when next year rolls around anyway. So, um, maybe he leaves and you sign him back on a minor league contract, but keeping him on the 40 man just doesn't seem like it would make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, no, I just think you've got enough other options not to worry about it.
Right. So to summarize, Pedro Florimon has no options. The Twins have options.
Correct.
Correct. All right, let's move on to New Britain.
All right, Britain tonight beat Bowie 2-0. Jason Wheeler was terrific again. He went 7 1/3 and gave up just 4 hits, no walks, and struck out 5 for his third Double-A win. Ryan O'Rourke worked an inning and struck out 2, and then Dan Turpin got the save by getting the final 2 outs. One of them came on a strikeout. The Rockcats got to hit against Eddie Gamboa, who is a knuckleballer in Double-A. They didn't do much. They had just 5 hits, but Mike Gonzalez had the big one, a 2-run home run. It's his third home run with the Rockcats. He's been pretty impressive, even though he's only hitting 158 now. But he does have the 3 home runs. Um, Other than that, I mean, like I said, just 4 other hits. Eddie Rosario and Jorge Polanco each had a single and a walk in the game, but not a whole lot more there. I did look. Um, Excuse me, I'm sniffling again here, but New Britain's now 58 and 62, and they're far from contention as far as for a playoff spot. I forgot to mention too, Rochester. They're currently 67 and 56 coming into the day, and I don't know how Syracuse and Pawtucket did tonight. Not too worried about it, but they were 2 games back of Syracuse in the International League North, and a game and a half behind Pawtucket for the wild card spot. So they're in third place in their own division of the International League, which has 3 divisions. But the wild card will come from the same division as well. The top 3 teams really in that league are all from the same division.
Certainly. You have one New Britain note here, and that's of Rockcat turned Red
Yeah,
Wing back to Rockcat, Ronaldo Rodriguez. Tell me about him.
and he's been tremendous all year. He's fourth in the league in slugging percentage at 518, sixth in the league in OPS 872. I think he hit his 16th home run. He did hit one up in Rochester as well. He and Nate Hansen both came back down along with Edgar Ibarra about a week ago. Like I said, like we talked about earlier, I think we talked about that last week. But Rodriguez, I did a story, and you can find it at twinsdaily.com today on Chad Allen on his days coming up in 1999 with 13 other Twins minor leaguers, and to that transition into coaching and some of the stuff he does there. But I talked to him about a couple weeks ago, and I asked him if what role Ronaldo Rodriguez has beyond just being a pretty good player. I said, you can tell the guys a lot, but when you got a guy like Rodriguez, and he just said, you know what, Rodriguez is a coach on the field. He's kind of taken Eddie Rosario and Kenny Vargas at the time under his wing, and they watch a guy that I think is 28, and obviously been around for a while, and he's running out ground balls to first base, and he's doing everything right. He's changed positions a couple times already this year and never complains and all that kind of stuff. And he says that alone has been really good for guys like Eddie Rosario and Kenny Vargas. You kind of wonder when Rosario had his thing last week or a week and a half ago, where they actually didn't play him for about 4 games for team whatever. If that's part of the reason that they brought Rodriguez back.
That's true. I hadn't even thought of that. You're such a thinker, Seth.
Deep thought.
Do you think, as a reward um, for Rodriguez, I mean, he'll be a minor league free agent at the end of the year, but do you think he's a guy that could maybe be added to the 40-man roster for the month of September to get a few days in the big leagues, and then obviously he'll be taken off the 40-man roster and be a free agent? Do you think he's a guy that would be in consideration? There's not a lot of outfielders that would really be in that discussion. Could he be one of them?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because it's an interesting idea, especially now that they've traded Willingham. You could, for a month, just say, good job, keep it up. We'd like you back next year on another minor league contract. We'll DFA you at the end of the year. You're not going to get claimed. But, it'd be interesting to give him 10 games out in left field and maybe even split some time with Jordan Schaefer, or let him pinch hit. Just let him live that life, even if it's just for, a couple of weeks. People get upset about that kind of stuff. I kind of like it. I think it's just, it's a good business model. We talked about it last week, letting guys know that you're going to get an opportunity when you come here. Even if it's short, you're going to get an opportunity if you perform, and he's done nothing but perform in his 2 years in the organization.
Yeah, and he was a guy too that I can't remember exactly where he came from, but in 2012 spent a lot of time in AAA, and then spent all of 2013 back in AA. Played first base, like you mentioned. Was basically their first baseman every day, and
Yep.
then didn't play first base really at all this year got moved to left field. So, like you said, he's bounced around, but he's been really good for him. I, I agree with you. I like to just reward the guy for what he's done. Give him, let him be a major leaguer for a month, and at the end of the day, nothing really changes for nothing really changes in regards to his standing with the organization. It's just you've really changed his life because he now, instead of making whatever he makes in the minor leagues, which isn't a whole bunch, he makes $2,500 a day for 30 days. That's a big deal.
It is. I mean, I'm not advocating calling up guys that are feel good stories just for the feel good story aspect of it, or doing it ahead of guys that have earned it. I mean, Aaron Hicks needs to come up. Aaron Hicks needs to be up before Reynaldo Rodriguez. Maybe Michael Tonkin, possibly Lester Oliveros. Some of those guys deserve to be up first because they could be part of the future. If Reynaldo Rodriguez gets that call up for a month over Eddie Rosario, I'm completely fine with that. Because Rosario hasn't put up the numbers. He'll still be at roster, which ultimately is much more important. He'll be added to the 40 after the season. But I would have no problem with, when we talked about Beresford earlier or Bernier, those are guys you don't mind seeing come up. Eric Ferris is a guy that, we talked about last week quite a bit in the Jordan Schaefer discussion. I would have no problem with him getting a chance, but you're also not going to call up 15 guys and, make
Right.
a ton of moves. There's only so many spots, but yeah, it'll be interesting. I don't know that there's a lot of givens at this point.
No, I think the only given at this point is Aaron Hicks.
And probably Meal Pinto.
Yeah, but I mean, if they make the playoffs, I don't think either of those guys will be September 1st guys. I think they'll be after Rochester's done type guys.
Right, and that's fine. I have no problem with that at all either.
Um, moving down to the Miracle.
Well, today they actually completed a game that was started in late June. They just played the last 5 innings. They were up 3-2 when the game started. They ended up losing 8-6. Um, what happened today? B.J. Hermson gave up a run in 2 2/3. Then Tyler Jones actually gave up 5 runs on 5 hits and 2 walks in just 2 innings to take the loss. I don't know exactly what happened today, but Aderlin Mejia and Dalton Hicks were each 2 for 4. Mejia had a double, and Nico Goodrum was 2 hits, with including a double as well. Then they played the regular schedule game, and they lost to St. Lucie 6-5. The big hit for the Miracle was a 3-run home run by Tyler Grimes, who was 2 for 4 in the game. It was just his second home run, and Aderlin Mejia was 2 for 4 in that game. Ethan Mildren started. He gave up all 6 runs. Just 4 of them were earned on 7 hits and 2 walks in 5 innings. Madison Bohr struck out the side in the 6th, although he did give up 1 hit, and DJ Johnson gave up 1 hit in the 7th, but did not allow a run. So the Miracle, obviously they did win the first half title in the what
Florida
am I
State.
trying to say, in the Florida State League in their division. So they're guaranteed a spot in the playoffs. In the second half, they're actually 29-21, but that puts them 2.5 games back in their division. So they could still win the division title in the second half, but either way, they're making the playoffs.
Same as what happened last year, and then they got swept in a 3-game series to
Wasn't it?
open
It
the
was a
playoffs.
two-game series, right? Or it was
But
a
then
three-game series, but they lost 2-0.
they got swept, yeah, 0-2. Your notes on that? You start with the record setter.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, again, he's kind of the polarizing guy throughout the organization, which is too bad that people seem to just take these things so personally with minor leaguers. But you know what? Despite what the batting average is, despite what the on base percentage is, sometimes you have to sit back and say, Adam Walker's got 24 home runs in the Florida State League this year, which is remarkable. People don't hit that many home runs there. It's actually 10 more than anyone else in the league. His 86 RBIs is 8 more than anyone else in the league. And again, we can talk about the value of RBI over and over again. But at the end of the day, those are numbers that are going to get you noticed, and those are numbers that I think will probably, especially with Buxton and Michael moving up, I think give him an opportunity. We talked about this previously too. He might get an opportunity in the Arizona Fall League as well to see what he can do against stiffer competition too.
Yeah, and I think
Um,
we're on the same page with Adam Walker. I would love to see his power in target field, though.
yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
I don't. It's going to be a while. Obviously, he's got some stuff he's got to work out because we don't want him to go all Domingo Santana and strike out 14 times in his first 17 at bats or anything. But
Right.
he's got crazy power. But power's no good if you never hit it. So,
Yeah,
um,
earlier today, someone actually asked me the question, who would be a good comp for him, and I put Chris Carter because he doesn't have a great batting average. He really doesn't get on base a ton, but he does hit a lot of home runs. And I asked, I kind of phrased it, what do other people think about that? And of course, right away, people were like, well, Chris Carter actually had a really good on base percentage in the minor leagues. So I don't know if there's a good comp. I think the odds obviously remain against Adam Walker being productive at the big league level if his on base percentage is less than or right around 300 in the Florida State League. But I also like, as the optimist that I try to be, think if he can have his strikeout rate be about where it is next year as a 23-year-old in the Double A level, which is where we assume he'll be, and he can put up similar numbers there, that shows improvement because the pitchers are better. Even if his numbers are the same, the pitchers are better, which shows improvement. And if he can do that again the next year in AAA as a 24-year-old, maybe he's up by the time he's 25, maybe even 25, 26. He can be a guy that is going to strike out a ton. Probably still isn't going to walk a ton, but every once in a while can hit one a long ways, and it's nice to have guys like that hitting seventh in our lineup. If he's not getting on base, you don't want him hitting third, fourth, fifth. But if he's hitting seventh or eighth and hitting, say, 20 home runs, that's a good thing. Now, that's a leap, because guys that don't get on base 30% of the time in the low minor leagues typically aren't going to increase that as they move up. But there's a lot of reason for optimism with Walker, and I'll stand behind that.
right. And the other thing that's been interesting too is the scouting report on him coming out of college was that he's probably going to end up at first base because he's not athletic enough to stick in the outfield. But he worked really, really hard on his game in the outfield, and now it's at the point where he's an above average defender, or maybe maybe not above average, but average to above average, and can stick in the outfield. So I mean that's another positive with him anyway. Is he's obviously hit for power, but defensively he's been better than what the scouting report initially thought he would be too.
Yeah, I mean, he'll be an okay right fielder. I don't think anyone should expect much more than that, but he can be an okay right fielder.
He's more athletic though than he's far more athletic than Josh Willingham. I would say
Oh,
he's
by
way
far.
more athletic than Oswaldo Arcia.
Maybe.
I mean, from the limited amount I've seen him play, I would say he's a much better athlete. I don't know how that translates. I think his arm's pretty good. He looked good down when I saw him last year, that weekend that I was down there. So I mean, I have a pretty small sample size that I'm basing that off of.
I mean, he is. He's a great athlete. He's very strong. He's got the quick and wrists and things like that. I mean, the weaknesses are knowing the strike zone and swinging and missing. And there's guys who have succeeded with that, but they're kind of few and far between. So clearly, improvement has to be made offensively, and I think improvement still needs to be there defensively. People want to rush people up, and I don't get that. I've talked about it before. Byron Buxton and Miguel Sano are top prospects because they'll likely be up by 21, maybe 22, just because of these injuries the last year. Those are the superstars. Those are the kind of guys that get called up at 21, 22, 20, 23. But most of your guys get called up at 24 and 25, and they're not your 3 and 4 hitters. They're your 7, 8, 9 hitters. They're your 2 hitters. They're things like that. So I just not everyone can be called up at 22. Not everyone's got that same talent level.
Right.
A couple
The
other
other,
things.
yep,
Last
keep
year,
going.
Adam Walker had 109 RBIs, which was one less than Dalton Hicks. This year, Dalton Hicks is tied for fourth in the Florida State League with 64 RBIs. He's really come on a lot more in July, since the beginning of July. Travis Harrison, we've talked about a bit, hasn't shown home run power, but he does have 30 doubles this year, which is third in the Florida State League. And then Nico Goodrum, he's hitting about 250, but his 27th stolen bases are third in the league.
Do you think the Twins add Nico Goodrum to the 40 man at the end of the year?
I don't. As much as I definitely believe he's going to continue to get better, I don't think he's the kind of guy that's going to stick on a 25 man roster next year. But I still think there's so much untapped potential there.
Don't you think, though? I mean, Everth Cabrera was a middle infielder that stuck. And don't you think Goodrum kind of profiles the same way?
I mean, he might, but those are so rare and far in between that you know I I don't know. I might be wrong. He could.
The the Twins once protected a Starlin de Los Santos.
Yep,
Remember that?
I do. Same year the 40 man Davidson Romero.
So if they're going to protect that type of guy, if Goodrum could actually stick it short, you that you almost don't want to even take that risk.
Yeah, and I still believe he can play shortstop, but the Twins haven't really played him there this year. So I don't know what that really says
Well,
about what they think.
he's got. Didn't he play there today? I mean, who's playing short? I assumed when Har came up to play third that Goodrum would move back to short now that Polanco's not there.
Which, yeah, I mean, especially with Michael not there either. Looking at it, Mejia played shortstop today. Har was at third. Actually, Goodrum had a day off, which has been pretty rare. But so yeah, we'll
Well,
maybe see tomorrow what they end up doing.
yeah, I would assume
Oh,
that
and you
Goodrum.
know what? Tyler Grimes was at second, so you can assume probably that Goodrum maybe goes to short, Mejia goes to second.
Right. And I mean, Grimes has played a little bit of second, so he could do that. But on their roster right now, the only middle infielders that I even have listed are Mejia and Goodrum.
Yeah, I mean, this year Grimes has played center, right, left, third, second, and caught.
Right.
So I mean, he's not a middle infielder.
Right. And I mean, he was drafted as a shortstop and played at Beloit as a shortstop that whole year. But I would just think going forward, Goodrum's got to play shortstop basically every day for the rest of the year.
I'd like to see it because I believe he can. All right,
Uh,
going down to Cedar Rapids, they won tonight in Beloit, 12-5. They had a 6-run fifth inning and a 4-run sixth inning that really accounted for most of the offense. So we'll start there. Chad Christensen was 2 for 6, both singles, but he drove in 3 runs. Mitch Garver had 2 hits. Alex Swim had 2 hits. Max Murphy had 2 hits. Logan Wade had 2 hits. And even guys with 1 hit, the 7, 8, 9 hitters, J.D. Williams, Angel Bielma, and Tanner Vavra each had 2 RBIs. Vavra had a single and walked twice. So kind of everybody contributed in the game offensively for them. Um, Looking at the pitching, Ryan Eads was actually okay. He gave up 2 runs on 9 hits and 3 walks in 6 innings, which of course isn't that great because it's a WHIP of 2.0. But just the 2 runs, he struck out 4 to win his 8th game of the year. Josue Montanez gave up 3 runs on 4 hits in his inning. And then Hudson Boyd pitched 2 innings, no runs, just 1 hit, 1 walk, and he struck out 1 as well. So Cedar Rapids, as far as where they're at, they were really pretty poor in the first half of their season. But in the second half, they've been playing well. They've been getting better pitching, and those guys we named originally have really taken off. I mean, add Brian Hart to that, but Chad Christensen, Mitch Garver, Alex Swim, adding Max Murphy, Logan Wade coming back, Ryan Walker's been a little better. I mean, you got a pretty decent lineup there. They are 28 and 21 in the second half, and that was one game. I think they're 29 and 21 now after tonight. They were one game back, tied for second with Wisconsin. They were a game back of Kane County. So basically, there's three teams within one game of each other at the top of the division. Um, so
But
I think
isn't
there's a decent chance they make it.
because isn't didn't Kane County aren't they already in?
I don't know.
I,
People got to
I,
know I don't pay attention.
yeah, I'm pretty sure Kane County is in. So two of the two teams will make it, and there's three teams that are close, but now the Colonels are the first of those teams, or tied for first, and then there's a team that's a couple games behind them. I'm fairly certain that's how it is.
Yeah.
Not that it matters. I mean, if they go on a 10-game losing streak, they're out. But
Yep. We'll pay
I'm fairly.
attention now more as the season's getting to the final about 3 weeks. We'll pay more attention here. But again, it's been Chad Christensen and Mitch Garver and Alex Swim. I mean, those three, along with Brian Hart, have been doing it for about the last 2 months. And again, adding Max Murphy has been a positive. They lost Jason Kanzler, who's doing okay in Fort Myers, but I mean, they've just played so much better. That bullpen has been incredible. Jake Reed, I don't think, has given up a run yet for the Colonels. I think he's pitched 14 innings. Dallas Gallant gave up his first run in a long time recently. If you looked again, like we talked about last week, at that bullpen or relief pitchers of the month of July, it was just full of Cedar Rapids guys, and they've really been tremendous. And the starters, Lewis Thorpe had his best start. Steve Lean, one of the guys that writes the minor league reports at Twins Daily, was there on Saturday night and had the opportunity to talk to Lewis Thorpe after the game, and actually talked to Joe Mauer after the game, and he asked about Lewis Thorpe. And there's an article at Twins Daily on the front page about what he learned there that's worth watching. Chi-Wei Hu had a tough inning. He was the pitcher of the month in July, and he actually, in his most recent start, gave up 6 runs, but he threw 3 scoreless innings before giving up 6 runs in the fourth. So I mean, he's been tremendous, except for the one inning. They're just, Gonsalves has been good, and Slager's finally got that promotion. That Cedar Rapids team is pretty good, and I always recommend it. But if you're in the cities or you're within, say, 4 or 5 hours of Cedar Rapids, make a weekend out of it and see if you can't get down to a game, because it's gonna be pretty excited down the stretch.
And Cole Stewart's back. I mean, they haven't announced when officially he'll throw. I want to say he's throwing. Did he throw like a bullpen like Saturday
Yep.
maybe?
Yeah, and they haven't put him on the rotation yet. He's not in for the next 5 days, but the assumption is he'll probably make his next start whenever they slot him in, and we'll probably be able to make potentially 3 more starts. And if they get into the playoffs, they may have him start one of those.
Yeah, because it didn't. Did I read that they want to get him to about 100 innings?
Yeah, and if he can get 3 more starts at about, the first one's probably going to be 3 innings, the next one maybe four, and next one maybe five. Suddenly you're, 12 more innings, and maybe he gets up to 16 to 18, but that puts him in that 95 range, which is not bad either.
Right. Yeah, that'll be a fun race to watch. Moving down to E-Town, I think
Well,
you can go ahead, Seth.
I was gonna say it's become kind of the normal thing for them right now. They get rained out and then they play a doubleheader, and tonight was one of the games where I believe they got rained out. Um, I saw after the first game, Jeremy wrote the minor league report for Twins Daily last night. I noticed that Nick Gordon was 2 for 4 in game one, which raised his average up to, I think, 302. So I tweeted that, and then right away you had to kind of shatter my dream there by saying he was 0 for 2 or whatever in the second game and down to 298 again. But I mean, what have your impressions been of Gordon? What were you hoping you'd see, and where has he been relative to that?
Well, I think when we talked right after the draft, we assumed that he would go, or right after he was drafted, we assumed he would go to the Gulf Coast League and just kind of get his feet wet and do that. And so when he was aggressively placed in the Appy League, I think a lot of us were surprised. And then for him to go there and flirt with 300 has been even more of a surprise.
Right.
So, I mean, for me, he's exceeded all expectations, despite reading some things at like the Fangraphs guys at Stoltz
Yeah.
had written about him. Um, he's exceeded all the expectations, and it'll be interesting to see what happens because Vielma has played well for Cedar Rapids, so um, he's obviously going to slot behind him, I would assume, next year. And if Goodrum or Polanco or however that works, if those guys all move up one step, um, he's the prospect, so guys aren't going to necessarily get in his way. But when there's capable people in front of him, it's going to push him a little bit more. So, or it's going to hopefully push him a little bit more. I, I think this year, no matter how he finishes, it's going to be a success for him because he's had success um, at a level where a lot of high school kids aren't. So next year, I think it's almost a certainty he opens a year at Cedar Rapids, and that's really when you can kind of start paying attention to his stats a little bit more because there'll be a bigger sample size and he'll have to play every day. And I think at this point he seems like he's probably getting a day off completely a week and a day that he just DHs. And um, when he starts playing 7 days a week and it's a grind, 140 games whatever they play, it'll be interesting to see how he responds.
Yeah, I mean, but the key is he's had about 180 plate appearances this year already, and that's what the 298 batting average is in. I mean, nine extra base hits, so not a ton, but we kind of knew that he's going to grow as a player, as a person, all of that over time, and going to instructional league will be huge for him. Learning more there. I'm really curious. So I think we can agree he's going to go to Cedar Rapids to open next season.
Yeah,
I wonder if Vielma goes up to Fort Myers or they have him down in Cedar Rapids at least to start the season again and have those guys. Maybe Vielma ends up playing at second, which I think is a possibility. Or if they have Vielma push him up to Fort Myers if they think he's ready for that. He's obviously defensively, Vielma would be ready to play shortstop in the Florida State League. I just wonder if they would do that with his bat, and they might. So I'm curious, but at the end of the day, like you said, Gordon's the prospect. He's shown really well for himself so far this stint as an 18-year-old in the Appalachian League, and to me, I think he's incredibly exciting.
yeah. I mean, I guess it maybe depends on if you think Ryan Walker can be the everyday shortstop in Fort Myers. Um, or if Goodrum, maybe doesn't move up, or I think there's a lot of moving pieces there. But I think the guy is Nick Gordon, and he's got to go to Cedar Rapids. So the other guys can just kind of fall where they need to fall. But Vilma might be the next best prospect there, and I think you'd want him to play shortstop, but his bat's not where it needs to be. So having him play second or having him and having the two of them flip flop back and forth. But again, I don't know that you want to take those innings at shortstop away from Gordon either. So
Yeah, and I don't think they would.
it'll be interesting to see. But having middle infield depth in this organization is good to see because there just really hasn't been really ever.
Yep. Yeah, if you're going all the way up to Santana and Polanco and Michael and Goodrum and Vielma and I mean now Gordon, that's a pretty good group of prospects that you're hoping one can eventually play short and one can eventually play second at some point. 5 years from now, you've got a couple of those guys playing. As far as leaderboard goes, Trey Vavra is fifth with 12 doubles. Tyler Caresa is third with 33 RBIs. And you got to consider in this league, not everybody plays every day. Even Nick Gordon gets some time off, and the other guys, the college guys, they're going to get some time off. And of course, Max Murphy still leads the league with 10 home runs, 378 batting average, 483 on base percentage, 723 slugging. By the way, the next high is 525, so almost 200 points difference. And then OPS 1.206. The next high was 930. So safe to say that he's has kind of dominated that league. And then Jeremiah Pineda, obviously a speed guy, 16 stolen bases, which is second. And then the other thing was Brandon Paulson made his debut. Talk a little bit about that, Jeremy.
Yeah, he's the art school guy that they signed. Interesting story. He was pitching in a men's league, and the the area scout had seen him before, and he wasn't worth signing, but he was a guy that he had kind of filed away in his memory bank, and Polson had kind of corrected some things, got some coaching, and started throwing it pretty hard. And now it's really been picked up nationally everywhere. He was featured on the NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams. Um, Throws 100 miles an hour. Throws I've heard up to 92 mile an hour slider. I've also heard unofficially that his changeup is not bad either. Um, you threw 3 bullpens down in Tennessee before making his his first appearance last Friday. Only pitched 1 inning. I think he walked a batter, didn't strike any out, but only threw fastballs. So here's a guy I think he's 24, um, has quite a ceiling because he has 0 mileage on his arm, and to get the national recognition, um, it'll be interesting. It'll be very interesting to see how the Twins move forward with him. Not only because he throws so hard, but they're not ruling out that he could become a starter. Which you wonder how. I mean, Cole Stewart went from throwing 40 innings in high school, and then threw some professionally, not a ton last year. Now he's up to 100 innings, and then next year I think they'll try to probably get him up to 130 innings, and then into the 160s before getting to 200. So for Cole Stewart, I mean, that's a 5-year thing before you can get to 200 innings. And if Polson could be a starter, then it's a 5-year process to get him to there. You're talking about a 30-year-old uh, that's finally getting his arm to the point where he can throw 200 innings. So it's just a really unique case. A very, very, very smooth delivery. It looks like a guy that's been pitching forever. And the comment that I heard was, guys that throw that hard, there's usually more effort because you need to, make the ball come out 100 miles an hour. And with him, it's just like playing catch. And if you lined him up next to Nick Birdie and next to Michael Cedar-Roth, the 3 guys that throw 100 miles an hour, I don't think there's anybody that would tell you that Polson doesn't have the most smooth, the prettiest delivery. If you didn't know anything about these guys, you would say, well, yeah, that guy's been pitching. He's a little more advanced than the other guys, even though he was pitching at an art school. So it's a really unique story. It's one worth following, and I got tired of seeing the comments about, oh, the Twins will do anything to drum up interest. That's not what this is about. There was a bidding war, and they spent $250,000 on a guy that was undrafted. So I think it was like, worked out to like 6th-round money, and they just had more money in their draft pool than the other team. So definitely a story that's worth following. It's just hard when they keep getting rained out to know exactly when and how and what he's going to throw. So it's just something to watch for the next 3 weeks for sure.
Wow, when I asked for how he pitched in his outing, you get a good answer.
Well,
He's thorough, man.
I thought we should talk all about it. That's what we do, right?
That's what we do. Absolutely.
So yeah, you got the meat and the potatoes, and
And some like coleslaw,
I really
some
wanted to talk
corn.
about him. So it worked out
It's
just
a
fine.
great story, no question about it. And I mean, the difference is, and we've talked about it probably, the last 2 weeks, and people are aware of the story, but it is so interesting that, I mean, NBC has covered it. It started with the AP story, and Yahoo's done one, and I think all of the major networks have beyond the local ones. So he's become kind of this minor celebrity. Um, and like you said, he's I think what 24 now.
Yeah, I believe so.
So I mean, the whole idea of him starting is kind of a little bit silly, but I mean, why not? You might as well try it.
Yeah, he was born in February of 1990, so he's almost 3 full years older than Cedar Roth, um, and basically 3 years older than John Curtis. So he's 3 years older, but really not. I mean, he's the same age. I guess he's 10 months older than JT Charzois. So yeah, he's older. He's old for his league.
Well, yeah, and he should be. I mean, the Twins shouldn't just push him to Double A. So I mean, they're doing it right. I mean, he has a chance to move up quickly, but the other reality of it is why push it? They've got his rights for like the next 5 years. If he doesn't
7.
come up until he's 27 or 28, oh well, 27 through 33. I mean, you got to. Everyone's an individual, and when you're talking about a guy that's probably going to be a dominating type of bullpen arm if everything pans out and he stays healthy and becomes what obviously they hope he can become. I mean, if you have him from 28 to 34, that's a pretty good range too.
Right, he wouldn't need to be added to the 40-man roster until after 2017.
Right, right. So in other words, starting him at Elizabethton and getting him kind of involved and get through a couple of just a few outings this year through instructional league, maybe Cedar Rapids to start next year and see how that goes. But yeah, there's zero reason to push him.
You want to share your one note on the GCL Twins?
Amoris Minier's 7 home runs is tied for the league lead. I think he had 3 this last week. I mean, the guy's got some serious power. Strikes out a lot, but I mean, he's a guy worth kind of watching on your top 30 list just to see where he'll end up because you don't see a lot of guys hit that many home runs in the Gulf Coast League. Sano didn't, Rosario didn't, Arcia didn't. The last guy to have 7 home runs in the Gulf Coast League season was Chris Parmalee, and that was what 2006.
He had
So
8 of them.
I mean, he's yeah, and Parmalee would have been doing that after high school, which is basically the year that Minier is at right now too. So he's definitely one to watch.
Let's run through some questions here. We're about 10 minutes to hour number 2. Um,
Yikes.
so let's run through some questions. Here's a Twitter question from All Day with 2K. Will Jake Reed be promoted to Fort Myers soon?
Well, the first thing that had to happen was getting Birdie up there. As much as Reed has probably outpitched Birdie, it was clear, and it is clear that Birdie's probably the better prospect and is the guy that they're going to want for the playoffs. This may be a good situation, too, with Cedar Rapids continuing to push for a playoff. Gallant probably stays there. I think Reed probably stays there. And if they can get to the playoffs, their bullpen is still going to be a strength for them. So my guess is Reed will stay with Cedar Rapids the rest of the way. But at the same time, I wouldn't be shocked if he did move up to Fort
Yeah,
Myers.
I think they'll leave him as a closer. I mean, let him close. Um, but yeah, I mean, he's the type of guy that could move. Um, do you think, and this is not a question that I'm reading, but a question that I'm asking, do you think that Nick Birdie has a chance to pitch in the Arizona Fall League this year or not?
Um, I would think that. I mean, it's a good question. He could. I would guess that the Twins would prefer to keep him just in the instructional league for this year. Coming from, and I fully believe this, the college pitchers have been throwing since January. They need the time off, and I'd rather them keep him in Fort Myers and just let him pens here and there and get used to the system rather than going to Arizona and feeling like he needs to air it out for another 12 innings. Him
Yeah,
going to the Arizona Fall League.
that's how I felt too. Okay, let's hit these Twins Daily questions.
All
First
right.
question from Nader79A. Is there a good chance we see Stephen Pryor as a September call-up since he's on the 40-man roster and has some major league experience?
Let me ask you this first. What's his option situation?
He,
Do we know?
yeah, I can tell you in a second. He was optioned. He was had his contract purchased the end of 2012 and got hurt. Didn't didn't get optioned at all in 2013. Spent all that time gaining service time, and he is currently on his first option year in 2014.
Okay. Okay. I mean, my
So
assumption is that the
he has a over he has nearly 2 years of service time.
yeah. My assumption is he'll get called up for September or after the Rochester season, just to do that, just to get him there and be up, especially if there's a spot. So I think yeah, you'll see Tonkin and you'll see Pryor probably. At the same time, because of his option situation, the fact that he could be optioned the next 2 years, it's not 100% given. So I wouldn't. I'd probably put that more at 75% likely.
Can I go on right ahead and disagree with you?
Sure.
I'm going to disagree completely. I'm going to say we're not going to see Pryor, and here's why. He currently has one year and 125 days of service coming into this year. He was on the Mariners roster for 1 day, and the Super 2 cutoff is right around there. If he comes up at all, he's going to be going to arbitration. And
This year?
oh no, that would be next year.
This year or next year? Oh,
Next year.
okay.
So I don't think that they'll do it. Um, it- but I don't know. I don't think they're going to bring him up because I
I don't.
think
I don't think
for a
that'll
guy that
factor in.
no, but for a guy that hasn't pitched much, I mean, you don't want to just run up his service time if he's not going to pitch, and he's been hurt. So I think if you can do that in Rochester where you can use him the right way, um, then I don't think they will. I don't think there's any need to when you have the likes of Ryan Presley. You have a guy like Michael Tonkin, like you mentioned. Um, I also think that your guy Lester Oliveros should get another shot to pitch in the major leagues.
Well,
So, I
he's
mean, I
got
would I would
19
rather
strikeouts in his last 11 innings.
Oliveros.
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking? Yeah, I mean, I would like to see a guy like that audition. I mean, if they don't add him, he's a free agent at the end of the year. So
Right.
let's add him to the 40 man, give him 30 days to prove himself, and the thing is, you outright him. He's a free agent either way. So um, Pryor's got 2 more option years left. Bring him to spring training next year. He'll end up back in Rochester. I don't know what good it would do to bring him up for 30 days. Add more service time to him when he's probably not going to pitch a lot. Um, and you can shut him down because he's had that shoulder deal or whatever it was, something like his shoulder, like the inside of his shoulder. Shut him down and get him healthy and keep him in Fort Myers and monitor him. And, I just don't think there's any point to bringing him up. But I'm wrong often when it comes to Twin stuff, so who knows? Um, another good question from Nader79A. Due to his injury-plagued season, odds that Buxton falls out of the number one spot in the various postseason Hot 100 prospect lists, and if so, how far down? Seth, are you there? All right. Well, Seth may not be here, so I might just finish these questions on my own. Um, I think there's a very good chance that most lists don't have Buxton at number one. Chris Bryant is obviously a guy that's moving up lists. Addison Russell's another guy that's that's been great here lately. Um, so I could see Addison Russell getting some love. I think Buxton will stay in the top three. I don't think he'll drop further than that. But I don't know that we'll see him number one everywhere. Obviously, a good start to Double A will change that. Um, but at the same time, I would say he's not the favorite to be that guy. We're going to get Seth back in here. Oh, I think he got himself back in here.
Sorry
Seth,
about that.
Seth is back. Seth, what we're talking about is chances that Buxton stays number one on all the various postseason lists.
I wouldn't say all. I think Chris Bryant has made a case, though I don't know who else would. It'll probably be maybe even more with Buxton. If he just completely tanks at New Britain and in the Arizona Fall League, if that's where he goes, he could fall to 2 or 3. But if he's even just solid, I think most of the prospect gurus would realize where he's come from this year and put him back in that one spot.
Yeah, I think he'll probably be after Bryant, unless he blows up in Double A and in the Fall League. But I think at this point, I think right now it's probably 50-50, or it was, a month ago. Buxton hasn't really done anything since then. Uh, I would probably go with Buxton not at number one if I had to guess, but again, I'm not afraid to be wrong. Um, couple questions from Lightfoot 789. What are the chances Buxton, Sano, and Rosario start in Double A next season?
I would think very high. Along with probably Nick Birdie and Levi Michael and quite a few of those guys. But Rosario should start there because unless he actually ends the year fairly strong, um, no sense for Sano to start there unless they're uncomfortable and they could start him in Fort Myers just to give him 2 weeks and make sure he's comfortable and kind of keep him out of the potential cold conditions in New Britain too. I mean that would be the one thing maybe keeping that from happening. And yeah, Buxton, regardless of how the next month goes, is most likely destined to start next year in New Britain. Um, but yeah, I would, like I said, I expect Birdie to go there. I would expect, that to be a pretty prospect heavy roster. I think there's a lot of guys. I would think Walker's there, and I would think, we talked about already. Maybe Nico Goodrum's there. There's a lot of guys that definitely could be there. Not to mention J.O. Barrios would most likely or will most likely start there.
So we're talking about a team in New Britain potentially last year or next year that Fort Myers has won a division title in 2013 or 2014. Cedar Rapids made the playoffs. Or was actually Beloit, I think, in 2012, right? They made the playoffs. And was it
Yeah,
2011 then, these same guys at E-Town that won the championship? Or is that a year off?
right. Well, no. Yeah, you're right. They won a division title this year in Fort Myers. These are the guys that won the first half title last year in Cedar Rapids, and they won the Appalachian League title in 2012.
And they're coming together, man. They're winners.
Yeah, honestly, you don't want to make too much of that because obviously baseball is a individual sport within a team concept. But I do believe that learning how to win as a team is important. And another piece of that Chad Allen interview, he talked about the 13 rookies that came up together in 1999 and they struggled and they lost. But they had won in their minor league careers and they were able to talk to each other and know how to push each other's buttons, both in a good way or to push them to be better. There's value in having those guys kind of all play together over the next couple of years and then come up to the big leagues together, and fit in with the rest of the group. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, that's what I think too. Um, kind of on those same lines, do the Miracle have enough firepower to win the Florida State League championship without Buxton, Michael, and Polanco?
I mean, obviously that hurts, but you know, the answer for me, of course, always is in a playoff of short series. It's going to depend on your starting pitching,
Right.
and they've got some decent starting pitching. They've got some veteran guys that have actually done it before. So I think, sure, they can win it. They have enough offense, but I mean, this team is playing really well in the second half, and Buxton, frankly, hasn't been a big part of that. Polanco hasn't been a part of most of that. Yeah, I think you add Birdie to the back end of the bullpen, and you've added Kanzler and Haar, who are doing well and deserve this opportunity. I I think they can, sure.
Okay.
Will they? Who knows?
Right. I mean, it's going to come down to how their pitchers do.
Yep.
Um, questions from Rick Niederman. Do you have any injury update on JT Charzois and Luke Bard? And do you know why Austin Malinowski was released in the early spring?
Well, let's start with the injuries. We know JT Charzois had, and I know I'm saying that wrong too, but I can never remember the actual pronunciation. He had Tommy John, I believe, last August, and the most recent thing I heard is he most likely would pitch in instructional league. He is throwing off a mound. That's kind of the last I know there. Luke Bard had surgery because he had this isn't perfectly accurate, and I can follow up more. I've written about it at Twins Daily, but he had, I think, like tendons coming out of his shoulder, like actual detachment in his shoulder area. And you kind of wonder how he threw as well as he did towards the end of last year, because he shouldn't be able to throw when that's happening. So he had that surgery in mid-May, and they say it's a 12-month thing. So, I mean, he could be back right around May of next year as well. You feel bad because the guy's put in all the work, and it's just that shoulder was not right. So hopefully this takes care of it. As for Austin Malinowski, I mean, he was released early in spring training. Probably a week before some other guys did get released, he and Andre Martinez. I'm sure a couple of reasons. One, releasing him early might give him another opportunity with another organization, which nobody else signed him. He did, I think, spend a little bit of time in an independent league, but last I heard, he had just enrolled and was starting college here now. So I don't think anyone's picked him up. I guess I don't know if he's, it sounds bad, but if he's given up on, a career in baseball and completely moved on, or if he'd still be open to another opportunity, and I guess we'll see.
I do know that he pitched. He pitched against Brandon Warren's team.
Right.
Brandon had tweeted that at one point. So, yeah, I mean, the road ends everywhere for somebody, or the road ends somewhere for everybody. It's getting late, but yeah, you get the point.
Yeah.
And last question of the night, and then I got one question for you, but I'm going to ask
Okay.
this last question. Try to decipher what this means. This is from Lightfoot789. He says, clear your mind and forget about Adam Brett Walker for a second, which really makes you think about Adam Brett Walker. But anyway.
Right. Yeah, totally thinking about him now.
Would you ever consider a player a disappointment if you heard he obtained 28 home runs and 100 RBIs, even in the minor leagues? If so, what would be your acceptable trade-off?
I would say no. I mean, that's my short answer. If someone hits 28 home runs, drives in 100 RBIs, that's not a disappointing year. Obviously, it's impossible not to throw out this scenario without bringing up Adam Walker. But yeah, I mean, you want to see a higher on-base percentage. You want to see cut down a little bit on the strikeout percentage, and you want it on. I mean, you want more competent at bats, because when he does make contact, he hits the ball hard. So I mean, it's impossible to separate the question. But the short answer, yeah, if you had 28 home runs and drive in 100, I'd never be disappointed in that season.
I think that's a fair assessment. Here's my question for you. I see that you and Mike are having a little conversation here on Twitter. it's really not that much of a conversation. Berardino tweeted
Let's
that
just see, I have it.
Guardy on Johan Pino's immediate future. Pino's in the rotation. He just didn't have a good day. To which you said, good. And Mike then said, think he was just being nice unless they go to a six-man, which they show no interest in doing. He's the odd man out. Here is my question. Is Pino the odd man out, or is Trevor May the odd man out?
I think again after tonight, I think Trevor May might be, but I'd like to see him continuing to work out of the bullpen like he is. Though again, with Rochester still in the playoffs, I wouldn't mind him getting sent down. I mean, my point is this: Pino had a clunker tonight, no question about it. 7 runs in what, 4 1/3, 4 2/3. But for the most part, he's been pretty good. I mean, not great, not number one, but number four starter. And although he's probably not a huge part of the future, it's worth giving him the time because he's been pretty good other than tonight. So I just hate seeing, a guy have one bad game and it like validates everything we thought before. I'd like to see him
Right.
get another one. At the same time, I don't know what to do with Trevor May. He again wasn't terrific tonight, though he at least only walked two and 2 1/3. But I mean, I don't know what the right answer is. I don't know that taking him and keeping him in the rotation would be wise. Whether it'd be better to have him pitch in this type of a blowout type of game, for a couple innings here and there, or to just send him back to Rochester and let him work on every fifth day type of a rotation. I don't know what's the best.
Yeah, today May in 2 1/3 gave up 3 hits, 3 runs, 2 of them earned, 2 walks, and 2 strikeouts. So yeah, between him and Pino, maybe they send them both down and they call up Sean Gilmartin and Alex Meyer.
Yep, I can pretty much guarantee you that's not happening.
um, one
Guarantee
last
that.
one last question for you. Did you happen to see Marlon Byrd try to field the fly ball in right field tonight?
No.
Uh, they're playing, I think, at home, or maybe I think they're playing the Angels, and there's a ball hit right down the right field line, like right in the corner, and he just has his hands up, he's running, and he just overruns it, and it lands right behind him for a ground rule double. It's like
That's
the
just
blooper.
weird.
It was really close to hitting him in the head. I mean, it could have hit him in the head and went over the fence. Would that have been a home run then?
Yes.
Yeah, that could have very easily happened.
That's
Let's
awesome.
call it an evening. We
Hey, real
we went
quick,
over our
Jeremy, I
night.
want to I want to mention to people, if you still are listening to this, by the end of the week we do have the blogging for pizza thing, I guess, at Twins Daily, where if you write a blog and it incorporates Joe Mauer in any way in it, and you're from Minnesota and it's 100 words and it incorporates Joe Mauer, you're going to get a pizza from Papa John. So um, it kind of gives you an opportunity to see how easy it can be to start your own blog, to get yourself an audience, to have just people discuss your stuff. So if you're at all interested and want a free pizza, try that out.
And I should mention too that if you are at the Twins game on Saturday at Deck Extravaganza, that I will be there. Social media night. So that will also mark the 1 week until the Touch 'Em All pub crawl that Seth and I will both be at. Seth,
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
is there any chance I shave your head at the Touch 'Em All pub crawl?
Um, Maybe.
We're gonna bick it.
Yeah,
We're just gonna cut it all off.
it'd be kind of fun.
Maybe we can do that for charity at the Twins game.
There we go.
All right, we're gonna call it a
Kind
night.
of
Thanks for
scary.
listening. Download us from iTunes. Leave us feedback. Send Seth angry tweets if he's wrong, like that guy last night was doing. Uh,
Yeah,
good
I don't
times.
block many people, but yeah, there's a few that are right on the verge of getting blocked.
I don't block anybody.
I generally don't. There's only been one so far that I have.
Was it someone that has an actual first name and last name with a picture of themselves on Twitter?
I don't think so.
See, those are the only real people. Everybody else is just, someone that hides behind something else. You know what I mean?
Agree.
So, thanks for listening. We'll be back next Tuesday. We'll have plenty to talk about, I'm sure. And that's the plan. So, join us next Tuesday night, and we will see you all then.